Okay, so I'm going to quickly go over oxygen regulation in this video. To understand oxygen regulation, we need to start by taking a look at simple diffusion. So when we're looking at simple diffusion, we're looking at any kind of small nonpolar molecules. What's going to happen with these guys is that they're small enough that they can fit between the phospholipid heads of the phospholipid bilayer, but they're also nonpolar, which is going to allow them to move through this area in the center and be able to make it through to the other side. So some examples of molecules that are moving via simple diffusion are things like oxygen and carbon dioxide. And so because they're moving directly through the phospholipid bilayer, something that every cell has, that means that the cell can't directly regulate those things entering or leaving. So instead, especially in multicellular organisms, we're going to have mechanisms that create this concentration gradient and keep it high enough so that oxygen is constantly moving in, and keep the concentration of carbon dioxide outside low enough so that anything that's made is constantly getting pushed out. And so that's going to be the role of the respiratory system. We've already taken a look at this, but let's go through the parts again so that as I'm referring to them, you remain familiar with them. Starting off with the nose, the nasal cavity, and the pharynx, basically everything up in your head, moving down into the trachea, down there in the center. And remember, it's got that ribbing that keeps it open. From there, the trachea is going to branch into two bronchi. Those bronchi then branch into bronchioles. And then finally, if we zoom way in, the end of the bronchioles terminate at alveoli, or little air sacs that are then surrounded by capillaries, where the exchange of gases is going to occur. So if we take a look at all of those pieces from the bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli, capillaries, all of that make up the lungs. And so we're going to look at how different gases move into and out of the respiratory system. So we can start right here with the movement of oxygen that's going to enter the nasal cavity, move on down into the lung, down the bronchiole, and at the alveolus, it's going to move via simple diffusion across the membranes and then into the red blood cells, where it's going to be transported out to the body tissues, where it's then going to be able to be used. And of course, we're keeping a high concentration gradient. So the atmosphere has a higher concentration of oxygen than what you would find anywhere else in the body. That's going to allow it to diffuse into the alveoli, diffuse across and into the blood. From the blood, we're constantly moving the blood that's in the lung out, and then it's carrying it to body cells that are going to be frequently using the oxygen. So that's going to keep this side, this side of the picture, keep the concentration of oxygen really low and keep that concentration gradient really high. Remember, in your gizmo, you saw that as the concentration gradient is higher, diffusion rates occur faster. So that's going to mean by using up this oxygen at a pretty decent clip, you've got just a non-stop movement of oxygen into the body tissues. Now, if we take a look at the flip side of that, the respiratory system isn't just about bringing oxygen in, but also about bringing that carbon dioxide that's being produced out. So remember that when you take a sugar and chop it on up during cell respiration, what you're left with is carbon dioxide molecules that are going to be formed, and they're going to enter into the bloodstream, eventually make their way up to the lung, and from the lung, they're then going to move backwards into the alveolus, up the bronchi, up the trachea, and out each time you exhale. Same concept going on here is that we're keeping a concentration gradient going, so there's constantly more and more carbon dioxide being produced. And so by exhaling and getting rid of it, we keep the concentration of carbon dioxide in the lungs much, much lower than where they are at the body tissues. So that's why if you hold your breath, right, and you're waiting and you're holding it, by not exhaling, it actually makes it harder to continue to hold your breath. Whereas if you exhale and push some of that carbon dioxide out, you have enough of a gradient that more carbon dioxide is exiting, and it doesn't feel quite so difficult to hold your breath. Okay, so we're finally going to look at the negative feedback mechanism, the part that I'm guessing a lot of you struggled with. So to understand this negative feedback mechanism, we need to start by looking at the chemical reaction that happens between carbon dioxide and water. So carbon dioxide is constantly being produced by the cells, making its way into your blood. In your blood, about 70% water, those two chemicals are going to combine and form a chemical known as carbonic acid. And as you can guess, carbonic acid is acidic. That means that it's taking the pH and dropping the pH of your blood. So your body does not have the direct ability to sense how much oxygen or how much carbon dioxide you have. Instead, it's using the pH. In other words, how much carbonic acid, among other things, is there. As you get more and more carbonic acid, you're going to see that that pH level is going to fluctuate, maybe drop a little towards the acidic, raise a little bit towards more basic as you have less. And that's a normal thing over the course of any second, really, is that you're constantly just fine tuning. Think of it like driving. Your goal is to go straight, but if you veer a little left, that's okay. You just correct. Go a little right, go a little left, and those corrections are just minute. So long as you're staying within roughly a 7.35 to 7.45 range, life is good. And remember that for pH, a completely neutral solution is going to be 7. So as it is, our bodies are just ever so slightly basic, at least the blood is. Okay, so right here, we've got our blood, right? And there's a combination here of oxygen, carbon dioxide. Obviously, there's a lot that's not being shown, and none of this is to scale, but we're going to roll with it. And so let's say you're doing exercise. If you are working out vigorously and all of your muscle cells are using up the oxygen to produce carbon dioxide during cell respiration, and in the process making lots and lots of ATP, you're going to start having an increase in carbon dioxide in the blood. That carbon dioxide is going to mix with the water, forming carbonic acid, and that's leading to the drop in pH. This is our stimulus, okay? The body is going to then be able to recognize that drop in pH, not the CO2 levels rising, not the oxygen levels dropping. It's recognizing the pH of the blood has now become slightly acidic, and that's normal, that's fine. At that point, the brain goes, well, we need to do something about this. So the effector is going to be the diaphragm, and it's going to increase how rapidly you're breathing. More breathing means more CO2 is expelled, more oxygen is brought in, which is really what we needed to begin with, and the carbonic acid levels drop, and that's going to cause our pH levels to go back to that set point of about 7.4. So you've been working out, your body's now getting the signal, breathe fast, breathe fast, breathe fast. Well, if you stop working out, what's eventually going to happen is that you're bringing in so much oxygen into your body because the message is still there, breathe fast, right? So now you have less carbon dioxide and less carbonic acid, and your body, the blood will actually flip and go a little bit more basic than what it should be. Your pH levels now increase instead of dropping. That's going to cause the opposite effect. Your brain is going to recognize this slightly alkaline condition, send signals to the diaphragm, hey, thanks for doing your thing, but you can go ahead and slow down now. That slowed breathing rate is going to allow for carbon dioxide levels to increase back up so that there's enough carbonic acid in the blood to bring the pH back to the set point of about 7.4. Boom. Okay. This is also why if you're exercising, no, that's not where I wanted to go with this. This is also why if you're hyperventilating, you're breathing really, really fast. Maybe you're upset about, whatever. you're getting this high amount of oxygen coming into the body, you're getting rid of all this carbon dioxide, and it's causing you to get a little bit lightheaded and a little bit less than happy, right? That is why if you are hyperventilating, your mom probably said, breathe into a paper bag. So what you're doing is taking this concentration gradient that's really high between your blood and the environment, right? That is allowing the carbon dioxide to diffuse out rapidly. You're taking that, and now your environment is starting to have a buildup of carbon dioxide as well, because it's a more enclosed environment, right? Just into the bag. That lessened concentration gradient means less carbon dioxide is diffusing out and is allowing the accumulation of carbon dioxide back into your body so that your pH can go back down to normal. It's also why if you have altitude sickness, if you're at a really, really high altitude and there's not a lot of oxygen, the concentration gradient, again, between the environment and your body's cells that usually would allow a pretty rapid diffusion to occur, well, now there's less oxygen because there's less pressure up in higher altitudes. And that means less oxygen is flowing into your body, and what is moving in is at a slower rate. So this is going to be important for your body to acclimate to it. If you climb a mountain too quickly, for example, if you're going up Mount Everest and you don't stop at the bases and stay there for a couple of days to acclimate, you can completely go nuts basically, because you don't have enough oxygen coming into your brain. Whereas if you stop and stay at each checkpoint for a couple of days, the body begins to produce more red blood cells, more hemoglobin, which is the molecule that's actually carrying the oxygen. So even though there's not as much of a concentration gradient, what little concentration gradient there is compensated for by having more blood that is available to transport that oxygen. So I hope this made sense. If you've got questions, let me know, and I will post the other two videos here shortly.